Hello, I wanted to talk today about anxiety because I'm giving a talk on Tuesday with some other colleagues at work about my experience with anxiety. Someone else from the US is going to talk about it as well, and our wellbeing lead is going to be on the call as well, kind of guiding the conversation. And it's really preparing for the talk has really been like therapy because I've had to really think about how anxiety has kind of affected me over my life, and the patterns, and just looking at how it manifests itself. What happens when I get anxious, and it's been really interesting because I suppose it's really only in the last few years that I've really been able to look at what happens to me, whether I shut down or I people please or whatever it is, and then calling that anxiety. And so it's been a bit like therapy. So in a way, I've put it into so far I've come up with sort of three things that I've found really interesting about it, which I thought were worth sharing, I suppose, insights, if you like. One is that it's like living a double life. I've got this life where I've got amazing people around me. I love my job. I, do lots of activities, horse riding and, kind of all kinds of lovely stuff. And then there are these things that happen, like I totally freeze and shut down. I mean, it tends to be that really only happens when, there's stuff going on in all aspects of my life, like stuff going on at work, stuff going on at home, and then a load of other stuff on top of that. And then, I would probably shut down and seem very disconnected, a bit like perhaps I don't care, certainly not present. And of course, it's not the case at all. I've just gone inwards and just, frozen somewhere, had a bit of an inner panic and, kind of shut off a little bit. It can feel like I've checked out. And, as I say, that tends to happen really when there's a lot of big stuff going on. So it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it can take a bit of time to, first of all, recognise it's going on. Second of all, then, being able to sit with all the emotions and everything to kind of allow some of that to move around and stop just being stuck as a big, painful ball in my chest. And then work through it, and then you get the growth and the expansion and the understanding and healing and all that kind of stuff. And the other way that it really affects me is people pleasing, overgiving and people pleasing. Like sometimes I just don't even think about what's right for me or what I want. I don't even pause. It's not all the time, but in certain situations. And, just go along with things without even thinking about it. And that's another trauma response. All these things: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fawn is the people pleasing one, which I only learnt recently, so that's why I'm spelling it out. They're all trauma responses from things that have happened to us or our families or, just whatever, those things. So, that living that kind of double life, it's like getting on with life. Life has its ups and downs, yeah. And then there's this other level of stuff that's going on as well, and that's been very present all my life. I can think back to a very young age when it just felt like everything was a bit harder. And just I would be feeling, well, you're having the same stuff going on and you're dealing with it in that way. And I don't seem to be able to. For ages, I was just convinced my brain didn't work in the same way as other people's. And to a certain extent, it was true. I started having some therapy about 10 years ago for a while, and I had some things stuck on my head, and then it read my brain. It was an EEG, and they reads the electroactivity or something in your brain. And it showed that certain parts of my brain weren't sort of as active as others because so much was stuck in my body. In terms of emotions, that the signals weren't sort of processing. I think that's kind of how it worked. So it did show up a bit of depression and things that kind of correlated with anxiety, even though I didn't ever feel depressed, because I have this drive to keep me going, all the time. and this energy, and that's the person on the top. It's like this drive, this energy, outgoing, all these things, you know, getting stuff done all the time, moving forward, coming up with ideas. And then there are these things where I freeze and, you know, get stuck, and then the creativity stops, the forward motion stops, and it's not deliberate. It's not that I don't want to do this stuff. It's it brings me on to my next point, actually. So if the first point was the double life, the second point is that it's anxiety, for me anyway, feels physical as well as emotional, because for me it really stops me in my tracks when I get this big ball of pain in my chest, or not in my solar plexus, or my throat sometimes swells up and gets really sore. And there's probably lots of different things for other people as well. I mean, I used to, when I first went into this therapy, I used to have a really uncomfortable big ball of stuff in my belly, and that processed over, it took about 5 years, I think, maybe longer, and it was really, really uncomfortable, prickly feeling for a long time. But I don't really have that anymore. I mean, that's amazing, really. That's a really amazing achievement when I look back on it. And the solar plexus thing, that tends to go in maybe a few hours or a couple of days. I think my chest, that tends to be when it's a really real biggie, and that's something I haven't quite worked through yet. But, you know, it will come, and that's the interesting stuff about all this. So, yeah, the second thing is it's physical as well as emotional. And then once you've kind of started to loosen up and allow some of this stuff to, I don't know, process, you've allowed some of the feelings to come up, and only do 1 or 2% at a time, just a little bit. That's enough sometimes to get some relief. Then you've got to deal with the emotions that come up because you've been suppressing them, or I've been suppressing them for so long. That's how it works. And then the third one was really that I was going to talk about was the fact that it's not always visible. Now, if someone's having a panic attack and they can't breathe, then yeah, of course, that is visible. But, you know, it could just be that someone, well, like I disconnect, or they become a bit, you know, everything's going a bit faster, their voice goes up. That's a real telltale sign for me. I always know when I start doing a meditation and if I'm guiding one, my voice drops. I'm like, oh, okay, my nervous system's regulating and I'm coming out of fight and flight now because my voice has dropped an octave, you know. But it could be things like that, or it could just be that they're running around and, you know, not really present, you know. But it's not always that visible. You'd have to be really tuned into those things to really realise. So I think they're the three things I'm going to talk about. And I think within that, the fight, flight, freeze and fawn thing, because that, you know, for me anyway, they're the sort of responses, the trauma responses that kick in when I have anxiety. And then, of course, you know, talking about what we can do about it, it's all about regulating the nervous system, and however you choose to do that. You know, I do it through a lot of meditation and mindfulness and all that kind of stuff, lots of spiritual stuff, gong baths and sound baths and drums and all that wonderful stuff of just being in nature. Yeah, hugging a big old tree can be really good for my anxiety. Anyway, that was all I wanted to share today. Slightly a bit of a practice run for what I'm going to talk about on Tuesday, but worth sharing, I think. You know, I think a lot of people probably have anxiety, especially at the moment with all the stuff that's going on in the world and how difficult things are for a lot of people with all the financial situation and everything. So I don't know if any of this resonates with anybody, but I thought it was worth doing a video on it. All right, well, have a lovely Sunday.